President Biden weighing in on the controversial Florida bill dubbed Don't Say Gay, tweeting this to members of the LGBTQ community, especially children, saying they're loved and accepted as they are. Now, the legislation would ban certain discussions about sexual orientation and gender identity in the classroom. The Biden administration saying they will continue to speak out about this legislation.
It's cruel, it's harmful, it is certainly something that is not helping, young people who are members of the LGBTQI plus community who are already vulnerable, already being bullied. I think the president felt it was important to speak out. But in terms of specific actions, we're going to continue to voice our strong views on this. It's significant the president did that, and if there's any additional steps, I'll let you know.
So joining us now are some of the brightest minds in politics, political commentator Ray Baker and BNC contributor Ameshia Cross. Ameshia, I'll begin with you. This bill has nothing to do with the LGBTQ community any more than the critical race theory had to do with concerns about racism being taught in America's schools. It is another one of those wedge issues. It is another part of the culture wars that Republicans will use to get voters out to the polls.
You're absolutely correct, Dale. This, much like the anti-CRT demonstrations and the laws that we've seen come out of Florida, Texas, and various other places across the country, are within the same vein. Obviously, Republicans know that midterms are coming up. These culture wars are big in terms of getting the base to turn out. They really want to win back those suburban white women who pushed the tilt for Biden in 2020. They want to make sure that they have really solidified that base, and they know that the core of that center is moms, is white moms specifically, and making sure that those women come out and they support these culture wars that in large part have absolutely nothing to do with education, nothing to do with curriculum. We know that CRT, for instance, isn't taught in any K through 12 or undergrad setting in America. We also know that there is no LGBT education that is being taught in school districts across this country. As someone who consults with school districts regularly, Florida included, I actually went to elementary school in Florida as well. This is not a thing. What is more concerning is that in Florida and in several other southern states, what we're seeing ratcheted up is non-attentiveness being paid to LGBT students who are talking about bullying, who are trying to get those concerns elevated to prevent serious bodily injury, in many cases where we've seen them get not only bullied, but beaten and abused, and teachers, staff, faculty, counselors, no one's really listening to their outcries. But to your point, that none of that matters to the Republican base and the Republican strategy, because their goal is to ratchet up fears, to ratchet up emotion, and to push to the polls come November. That is what all of this is about.
Ray, here's the problem that I have with this. Someone is going to get hurt. There is going to be a young gay child that is going to be bullied because of this particular piece of legislation and because of a parent who wants to get their 15 seconds of fame on the evening news at that time. There are 6 other states that are proposing similar legislation: Tennessee, Arizona, Louisiana, Mississippi, Oklahoma, and Texas. This isn't about whether or not somebody gets hurt. This is about votes. And that's what makes it so sad.
You're absolutely correct that it's about votes, and I appreciate the way that you led into your question to Ameshia. I appreciate her response because it helps inform our audience here about how silly and not on topic this particular thing is. But even if we engage what those voters who might be hearing this and might be motivated to respond to it is, we have to wonder, why is this a wedge issue, and why is this wedge issue effective? And unfortunately, it's effective because so many Americans exist in ways and allow themselves to be dehumanized, to be subjugated, to be ignored, and not have their emotional sensibilities tended to. And then when there's another group that says, no, tend to my emotional sensibilities, tend to my identity, tend to my humanity, so many of those Americans who neglected their own humanity now find or turn to be hostile to that group. And they're like, well, no one cared for me. You're correct. No one did care for you, but it was wrong. And we will now turn the page and begin to care for our fellow Americans. And what the thing that we have to communicate to so many Americans is Just because you knew of a world in one particular way does not mean that was the way the world should exist. And when there are others who come along to push us forward and make us better people, we, even those of us who came along in a world that was harsh to us, are better when we now open up and allow for that greater humanity in each of us. So yes, these are wedge issues. Yes, these issues are not material to the points about education, just as Ameshia alluded to. However, they're effective for some reason. And that reason for that effectiveness, we have to go and address the source of that.
Ameshia, this is the question that I keep asking. Who are these parents? These are parents whose parents were the hippies of the 60s, the people who protested against the war in Vietnam, the people who marched alongside Dr. King and saying, "We shall overcome." What happened to America that has now allowed an entire generation to be divided along issues that many in this country had thought were divided or decided years ago?
Populism. At the end of the day, populism has been something that has grown not only in America, but we've seen it grow across Eastern and Western Europe as well. With populism, you find someone to blame your grievances on. What we've seen is grievance politics take hold in this country and take shape in a way that is, quite frankly, unhinged, where you see a lot of white America, a lot of conservative America being not only upset with the browning of America, but also being upset with the fact that they now have to compete for things, including in certain job spaces that they never had to before. That they're just the term equity drives them crazy. That Black people had the nerve to protest in the streets and declare Black Lives Matter, and that there were actually some notable policy changes at state and local levels, as well as moves at the federal level that ensured that we can still talk about civil rights today, when many of them said, let's wrap up that page, let's move on, we're over it. And if you keep bringing up slavery, heck, you might as well still be enslaved. We have come to a point where I think that the page has been turned for white America in a way that Black America cannot, because of the consequence of the white supremacist systems that continue to have to be fought and have to be revitalized in a way that changes society for Black people. But it is sheerly populism. Populism tells whites across this country that they have to fight for an America that benefited them and only them, and that they are the only Americans, they are the only people who should be, harbingers of our democracy, that it is them and them alone, and they have to fight against everybody who does not look like them.